Preparing for a technical support interview can be both exciting and daunting, especially when you need to demonstrate your expertise in troubleshooting real-world technical issues. Whether you're looking to land a new role in IT support or simply want to refresh your skills, understanding the most commonly asked technical support interview questions and the best ways to tackle them is crucial. Before starting the video, here is Part 1. Basic Technical Support and Customer Service Representative Interview Questions and Answers for Beginners. This video covers real-time interview questions that are frequently asked in interviews. For the video links, please check the description below. First question: can you tell me about your previous experience in technical support? Sample answer: in my previous technical support role, I was responsible for resolving a range of technical issues for both end users and internal staff. I handled everything from troubleshooting hardware and software issues to assisting with network connectivity problems. My daily tasks involved diagnosing issues, guiding users through solutions, and creating detailed documentation for recurring problems to improve efficiency. Additionally, I worked with a team to manage system updates and train users on new software tools, ensuring minimal downtime and optimized productivity. In your previous roles, what types of technical challenges did you frequently encounter, and how did you approach solving them? Sample answer: one of the most common challenges I encountered was related to connectivity issues, either network outages or VPN access failures. I would first check the network settings and test the hardware, then move on to examining firewall settings and access permissions. Another frequent issue was software compatibility. In these cases, I would review system requirements, apply patches or updates, and sometimes implement temporary workarounds to keep users productive until a full solution was available. I followed a structured, step-by-step approach to diagnose and resolve issues quickly, documenting each case for reference. Can you explain your experience with ticketing systems for managing support requests? Sample answer: I have extensive experience using ticketing systems like ServiceNow and Zendesk to manage support requests efficiently. I use these platforms to track, prioritize, and document issues, ensuring no requests were overlooked. Ticketing systems helped me organize tasks based on urgency and SLAs, and the history of past tickets allowed me to identify recurring issues, improving problem-solving over time. Additionally, I use these systems to communicate with users and update them on the progress of their requests, creating a transparent support experience. How would you go about restoring data if a virus infected your computer? Sample answer: if a virus infection occurs, I would first isolate the computer from the network to prevent further spread. Next, I would use antivirus software to attempt to remove the virus. If needed, I would perform a deep scan with specialized malware removal tools. For data restoration, I would check if there's a recent backup available, either on the cloud or a secure drive, and restore the affected files from there. Finally, I would conduct a full scan after restoring the data to ensure the virus has been fully removed and apply any necessary patches or updates to prevent reinfection. How do you troubleshoot a slow computer? Sample answer: to troubleshoot a slow computer, I start by checking for any resource-heavy applications running in the background and use the task manager to monitor CPU and memory usage. I would then scan for malware, as viruses often slow down performance. Disk cleanup is another step to clear temporary files, and I'd also check if the hard drive is near capacity or fragmented. Finally, I would ensure all updates for the operating system and drivers are installed, as outdated software can impact performance. If needed, I would adjust startup programs to prevent unnecessary applications from launching on boot. What tools do you use to monitor and diagnose application performance issues? Sample answer: I have experience using a range of tools to monitor and diagnose application performance, including New Relic, Dynatrace, and SolarWinds for tracking application metrics like CPU, memory usage, and response times. Additionally, I use Windows Event Viewer or syslog for Linux systems to check for system or application error logs. For network-related performance, I utilize tools like Wireshark to analyze network traffic and detect potential bottleneck. These tools help me pinpoint root causes quickly, whether they're related to server load, network latency, or code inefficiency. Performance monitoring tools. If a blue screen error appears on your system, what steps would you take to troubleshoot and resolve it? Sample answer: a blue screen error, or BSOD, is typically caused by hardware or software issues. Here's how I would approach troubleshooting it. 1. Restart the system. A simple restart can often resolve temporary issues. 2. Check for recent changes. Identify any recent hardware or software changes that might be causing the problem. 3. Check system logs. Review system logs for error messages or clues about the cause of the BSOD. 4. Run hardware diagnostics. Use diagnostic tools to test hardware components like RAM, hard drive, and CPU. 5. Update drivers. Ensure that all device drivers are up to date. 6. Check for malware. Scan the system for malware infections. 7. Reinstall Windows. If the issue persists, reinstalling Windows might be necessary. How would you respond if a user is unable to update their software due to administrative restrictions? Sample answer. If a user faces administrative restrictions, I would first verify if the update is essential and aligns with company policy. Then, I would assess the user's permissions and, if appropriate, escalate their request to obtain temporary administrative privileges or work with IT to push the update centrally. Alternatively, I would consider providing the update through managed deployment tools like Microsoft SCCM or Intune if multiple users need the update. Ensuring compliance with security policies and minimizing disruption to the user's work is my priority. What are the key differences in troubleshooting on Unix Linux versus Windows? Sample answer. In Unix Linux, troubleshooting often relies on command line tools and script. Common tools include TOP and PS for monitoring processes, DMESC for kernel logs, and netstat for network diagnostic. Configuration files are usually text-based and found in etc., making them easily accessible and modifiable through editors like 6 or Nano. In Windows, troubleshooting often involves the Event Viewer for logs, Task Manager for resource monitoring, and using the control panel or settings for configuration changes. Windows also relies more on graphical interfaces, while Unix Linux encourages script-based troubleshooting and permissions management with commands like chmod and chown. Here are some key differences in troubleshooting Unix Linux and Windows. Command line interface. Unix Linux relies heavily on the command line interface, while Windows often uses a graphical user interface. File system. Unix Linux uses a hierarchical file system, while Windows uses a more complex file system. User permissions. Unix Linux has a more granular permission system than Windows. A user reports that their files are missing after logging in. How do you approach this situation? Sample answer. I would first verify if the user is logged into the correct account and check for any recent account or profile changes. Next, I would look for hidden files or folders and check the recycle bin in case files were deleted accidentally. If they use a network drive, I'd ensure it's properly mapped and connected. For cloud storage issues, e.g. OneDrive, Google Drive, I'd check the sync status and account settings. If these steps don't reveal the files, I would review backup options, such as system or cloud backups, to attempt file restoration. What steps would you take if an application suddenly crashes or freezes for a user? Answer. If an application crashes or freezes, I would start by asking the user for details about what they were doing just before the crash to identify any potential triggers. I would check the Task Manager, or equivalent on Mac or Linux, to see if there are any resource spikes, then try to close and restart the application. If it continues to crash, I'd review the application and system logs for error messages. Next, I would ensure the application is up to date and check for any conflicting background processes. If the issue persists, I would consider reinstalling the application or escalating to the development or vendor support team if necessary. How would you help a team member recover a deleted file that was stored on a network drive? Answer. First, I would check if the file can be recovered from the recycle bin or trash on their machine, as network-deleted files sometimes temporarily remain there. If that's not possible, I'd access the network drive's backup and restore functionality to locate previous versions of the file, as most network storage solutions have periodic backup. I would also check with IT for any available snapshots or backups for recent file versions. Finally, I'd communicate the progress with the team member to keep them informed and ensure they get the file restored as soon as possible. What experience do you have working with end users, and how did you ensure they received effective support? Answer. In my previous role, I worked closely with end users to resolve various technical issues. I took time to understand their needs and maintained clear, patient communication to explain steps in a way that was easy to follow. I prioritized building rapport, which helped users feel comfortable reaching out. Additionally, I always followed up to make sure the solution was effective and encouraged feedback. I used a ticketing system to keep track of issues and trends, allowing me to proactively address recurring issues and improve response times for common problems. How would you handle a situation where a team member's computer is displaying an "access denied" message for certain files? Answer. I would start by verifying that the team member is logged into the correct account and has the appropriate permissions. I would check the file permissions and ownership settings to ensure they are configured correctly. If needed, I would adjust the permissions or consult with the IT security team if the files are restricted due to security policies. Additionally, I would investigate whether there are any recent group policy changes or network issues that might be affecting access and keep the team member updated throughout the process. If a team member is experiencing issues with their external monitor setup, what troubleshooting steps would you take? To troubleshoot external monitor issues, I would 1. Check cable connections. Ensure all cables, including power and display cables, are securely connected. 2. Try a different monitor. Test the monitor on another computer to isolate the issue. 3. Adjust display settings. Check the display settings on the computer to ensure the correct monitor is selected. 4. Update display drivers. Update the display drivers for the graphics card. 5. Check monitor power settings. Ensure the monitor is not in power saving mode. 6. Consult the monitor's manual. Refer to the monitor's manual for specific troubleshooting step. How familiar are you with database backup and recovery procedures? Give an example of when you use them. Answer. I have experience with both manual and automated database backup and recovery processes. I've worked with tools like SQL Server Management Studio and Oracle RMAN for backup and recovery tasks. For example, in a previous role, a team member accidentally deleted records from a database. I was able to restore the lost data by identifying a recent backup file and restoring it selectively to prevent data loss. Additionally, I used incremental backups and scheduled regular backups to minimize downtime and protect against future data issues. How would you help a team member who is having issues with their password reset? Answer. First, I would verify that the team member has access to the correct password reset resources, such as self-service portals or specific security questions. If they're locked out of their account, I would confirm their identity as per company protocols and either reset the password myself, if I have administrative access, or guide them through the reset process. I'd also ensure that their account settings or permissions haven't changed, which might be causing the problem, and confirm that they can log in successfully after the reset. How do you handle software installation errors on a client's machine? Answer. If a client experiences software installation errors, I start by noting the error code and checking for any compatibility issues with the client's system. Next, I verify that the user has the correct permissions for installation and sufficient system resources. I often use Event Viewer to check for detailed logs and diagnose specific issues. In some cases, temporary files or previous installations can interfere, so I ensure all remnants are cleared before reattempting installation. If necessary, I use administrator privileges or a clean boot to complete the installation successfully. What steps would you take if a user cannot connect to the company's VPN? Answer. To troubleshoot VPN connection issues, I would follow these steps. 1. Verify VPN client configuration. Ensure the VPN client is configured correctly with the correct server address, username, and password. 2. Check network connectivity. Verify that the device is connected to the internet and can access other network resources. 3. Test VPN connection on another device. Try connecting to the VPN from another device to isolate the issue. 4. Update VPN client. Ensure the VPN client is up to date with the latest patches and security fixes. 5. Contact VPN administrator. If the issue persists, contact the VPN administrator for further assistance. What is the Windows recovery environment, and how can you access it to troubleshoot issues? Answer. The Windows Recovery Environment WinRE is a built-in recovery tool that allows you to troubleshoot and repair Windows system issues. You can access it by 1. Using the startup settings. Restart your computer and repeatedly press the F8 key to access the Advanced Boot Options menu. 2. Using the System Repair Disk. Insert a Windows installation disk or USB drive and boot from it. Once in WinRE, you can use various tools to System Restore. Restore your system to a previous point in time. System Image Recovery. Restore your system from a complete system image backup. Startup Repair. Automatically fix common startup issues. Command Prompt. Use advanced commands to troubleshoot and repair system files. What actions would you take if a computer displays a keyboard error during boot up? Answer. If a keyboard error occurs during boot up, the first step would be to check if the keyboard is properly connected to the system. I would ensure it is securely plugged into the correct port, whether it's USB or PS2. If the connection is fine, I would try using a different keyboard to rule out hardware failure. I would also check the BIOS UEFI settings to ensure that the keyboard is being detected correctly. If the issue persists, I would try resetting the BIOS to default settings, as there could be a conflict with the hardware configuration. How would you fix a computer that fails to boot due to a corrupted master boot record, MBR? Answer. To fix a corrupted MBR, I would boot the system using a Windows installation disk or recovery drive. From the recovery options, I would select Repair Your Computer, then navigate to Troubleshoot the Advanced Options with Command Prompt. In Command Prompt, I would run the following commands. 1. Bootrec Fixmber to fix the MBR. 2. Bootrec Fixboot to write a new boot sector. 3. Bootrec Rebuild to rebuild the boot configuration data. After running these commands, I would reboot the system and check if the issue is resolved. If not, I may need to repair the installation or restore from a backup. How would you help a user who is unable to print? Answer. I would start by confirming that the printer is powered on and properly connected to the computer, either via USB or network. I'd check if the printer is listed in the Devices and Printers section in the control panel. If it is, I would check the print queue for any stuck jobs and clear them if necessary. I'd also ensure that the printer driver is up to date. If the problem persists, I'd run the printer troubleshooter provided by Windows or Mac OS to detect and fix common issues. Additionally, I would check the network connection if the printer is networked and verify the status of the printer's IP address. How do you troubleshoot a computer that won't boot up? Answer. First, I would check if the computer is receiving power, ensuring the power cable and adapter are correctly plugged in and functioning. If there's no display, I would check the monitor and cables, then verify the system's internal components, such as RAM and hard drive connections. Next, I would check for any BIOS UEFI error messages or beeping codes that could indicate hardware failure. If the system fails to boot into Windows, I would attempt to boot from a recovery drive or installation media to run startup repairs, check disk errors, or attempt system restore. If necessary, I would isolate hardware issues and consider replacing faulty components. A user reports that their files are not syncing with cloud storage, e.g. OneDrive, Google Drive. How would you troubleshoot? Answer. I would begin by confirming that the user is logged into the correct account for the cloud storage service and that they have an active internet connection. Next, I would check if the cloud storage app is running and synchronized properly. I would look for any error messages in the app, such as insufficient space or syncing conflict. I'd also check if the files are correctly placed in the sync folder and verify that file naming or file size restrictions are not causing the issue. If the problem persists, I'd restart the app, ensure it's updated, or temporarily unlink and relink the account to reinitiate synchronization. Finally, I would check the cloud storage provider's status page to ensure there are no ongoing service disruptions. A team member is having trouble accessing a shared network drive. How would you troubleshoot this issue? Answer. I would start by verifying that the team member is connected to the correct network. I would check if the shared drive is accessible from other computers on the network to determine if the issue is isolated to their machine. Next, I would confirm that the correct network permissions are granted and ensure the drive is mapped correctly. I would also check the credentials to make sure they have proper access rights. If necessary, I would troubleshoot network connectivity, such as checking firewall settings or restarting network services. Finally, I would confirm that the server hosting the shared drive is online and functioning properly. How would you address an issue with video conferencing software, e.g. Teams, Zoom, that isn't working properly? Answer. First, I would check if the software is up to date, as bugs can sometimes be fixed in newer versions. Then, I would verify the user's internet connection to ensure they have sufficient bandwidth for video conferencing. I'd check the audio and video settings within the software to confirm that the correct devices, camera, microphone, speakers, are selected. If there's no video or audio, I would suggest restarting the application and the computer. For more complex issues, I would review any error messages and consult logs to identify the root cause. I'd also verify if there are any outages or issues on the software provider's end. How do you assist a team member with resolving connectivity issues with cloud-based applications, e.g., Office 365, Salesforce? Answer. I would start by confirming that the user has a stable internet connection. If the issue persists, I would verify if the cloud service is experiencing any outages by checking their status page. I would ensure the user's login credentials are correct and check if there are any authentication issues such as expired passwords or multi-factor authentication, MFA, problems. I would also check if any firewall or network settings are blocking access to the cloud service. If the issue is isolated to the user, I'd troubleshoot their application settings, clear cache or cookies, or reinstall the app if necessary. What is your process for troubleshooting a frozen system that is unresponsive? Answer. First, I would check if the system is completely frozen or if it's just a specific application that's unresponsive. If it's a system-wide freeze, I would try pressing Ctrl+Alt+Del to bring up the task manager. If that works, I would close any non-responsive applications. If the system remains frozen, I would attempt a soft reboot, pressing and holding the power button for a few seconds. After the restart, I would check system logs for errors and investigate hardware or software issues that might have caused the freeze, such as memory or CPU usage spike. I would also check if any recent updates or installs caused the issue and consider rolling them back. If a user complains of frequent disconnections from Wi-Fi, how would you investigate? Answer. I would start by checking the Wi-Fi signal strength on the user's device and determine if the issue is specific to their machine or affects others as well. I'd ask if the disconnections happen in particular areas or at specific times, which might suggest interference or bandwidth congestion. I would ensure the user's device is connecting to the correct network and check for any issues with the router, such as needing a firmware update or the possibility of network interference from other devices. I would also verify that the user's Wi-Fi adapter drivers are up to date and try resetting the router or switching the Wi-Fi channel to reduce interference. If the problem continues, I would check for any router settings that could be causing the disconnections, such as security settings or DHCP conflicts. What is your process for troubleshooting a computer that has no sound? Answer. First, I would check if the sound is muted or the volume is too low. I would verify the output device settings to ensure the correct speakers or headphones are selected. I would also check the audio driver to ensure it is installed and up to date. If the issue persists, I would test the audio on other applications or media to determine if the issue is system-wide or specific to a particular application. Additionally, I would check the device manager for any yellow exclamation marks indicating driver issues, and I would run the built-in troubleshooter in Windows or the equivalent on other OS. If needed, I would reinstall or update the audio drivers. How would you troubleshoot a webcam issue where the user is visible but not audible in a video call? Answer: I would start by confirming that the user's microphone is not muted within the video conferencing application. I would check if the correct microphone is selected in both the app and the system settings. I would verify that the microphone is not being used by any other application, as that could cause conflicts. If the microphone is properly configured but still not working, I would check for any driver issues in Device Manager or try reinstalling the audio drivers. Additionally, I would test the microphone with another application to rule out hardware failure. If a team member reports that emails are going to their spam or junk folder unexpectedly, how would you assist? Answer: I would start by checking if the sender's email address is on a block list or if any email filters or rules are causing the issue. I would guide the team member to mark the legitimate emails as not spam or move them to the inbox to improve future filtering. I would also check the email settings in their email client, such as Outlook, Gmail, to ensure that legitimate emails are not being automatically routed to junk. If necessary, I would review the server-side email settings or spam filter configuration and whitelist trusted senders to prevent further issues. How do you assist a user who is experiencing constant pop-ups or browser redirect? Answer: I would first ask the user to identify the browser and check if the pop-ups and redirects are occurring across all browsers or just one. I would guide the user to clear the browser cache and cookies, as these can sometimes cause unwanted behavior. Next, I would check for any potentially unwanted extensions or add-ons installed on the browser, disabling or removing any suspicious ones. I would also suggest running a full malware scan to check for adware or browser hijackers. If the issue persists, I would check the system for any rogue software and advise the user to reset their browser settings or reinstall the browser. What steps would you take if a team member's computer is overheating? Answer: First, I would advise the team member to power down the computer and let it cool down for a while to prevent any immediate damage. I would check for any obstructions around the vents or cooling fans that might be causing poor airflow. If the computer is a laptop, I would recommend using it on a hard, flat surface to ensure optimal cooling. I would also check if the fan is functioning properly and not clogged with dust, and if necessary, advise on cleaning the fan or using compressed air to remove dust buildup. If the overheating continues, I would check the system's temperature using diagnostic tools and consider adjusting the power settings to reduce the load on the processor or potentially replacing thermal paste if it's a hardware issue. How would you assist a user who cannot install software due to administrative restrictions? Answer: I would first verify the exact error message to understand the nature of the restriction. If the user doesn't have administrative privileges, I would explain the process for requesting elevated permissions from an administrator or IT department. If the software installation is essential for their work, I would escalate the issue to the appropriate team or provide a temporary admin account if permitted. In some cases, I would guide the user through the installation of software using portable versions or offer alternatives that don't require administrative access. How do you troubleshoot issues with a slow or lagging network connection for remote employees? Answer: I would start by checking if the issue is isolated to one employee or affecting others as well. For the individual, I would verify their internet speed using a speed test to see if it's sufficient for their need. I would also check if they are connected to the correct network, Wi-Fi or wired, and ensure no interference or bandwidth congestion. If necessary, I would guide them through restarting their modem or router, ensuring VPN connections are stable, or configuring quality of service, QoS, settings. I would also confirm that the employee's system or device is not running background applications that could be consuming bandwidth. If a team member's document won't save or they receive an error message, how do you troubleshoot? Answer: I would first ask for the exact error message to help pinpoint the issue. I would check if the document is being saved to a location with sufficient disk space or if there are any file path restrictions, e.g., too long of a file path. If they are working on a cloud-based document, I would verify their internet connection and check if the cloud service is down. I would also check if the file is open in another application or by another user, as this can cause saving issues. Lastly, I would recommend saving the document under a different name or in a different location to troubleshoot further. What would you do if a team member's calendar items are not syncing across devices? Answer: To troubleshoot calendar sync issues, I would check account settings. Verify that the calendar account is set up correctly and the sync settings are enabled. Restart the calendar app. Restart the calendar app to refresh the sync process. Check internet connection. Ensure a stable internet connection. Update calendar app. Update the calendar app to the latest version. Disable firewall or antivirus temporarily. Temporarily disable firewall or antivirus software to see if it is interfering with the sync process. Contact calendar service provider. If the issue persists, contact the calendar service provider support team for further assistance. Explain the process of a root cause analysis you conducted to prevent recurring issues. Answer. In one case, a recurring issue was identified where users were frequently losing access to shared drive. I started by gathering data, including error messages, affected users, and times when the issue occurred. I conducted a thorough investigation, which included reviewing system logs and conducting interviews with affected users. I discovered that the issue stemmed from a server misconfiguration that was intermittently causing connectivity issues with the shared drive. After identifying the root cause, I worked with the network team to correct the server settings and implemented a monitoring system to catch any future issues early. I also documented the process to help prevent similar issues in the future and trained the team on identifying early signs of trouble.